I'm just delighted to be back again with Kate Bennis. Last time we saw each other, I think, was in Charlottesville a few months ago. Kate is one of really my very favorite people on this planet. Just you're going to be so delighted to hear her. She is a really deep thinker, very thoughtful, complex, comprehensive. She recognized the value of the Golden Civilization conversations very quickly and invited us down to Charlottesville. And we had just a magnificent setting there. I should say that my connection with Kate goes back a number of years and goes back, we're connected in leadership circles where her father was quite a figure and Kate's also quite a figure. And she has been a dear friend of my wife, Kathy, in the theater world for many years. And one of the things that I learned last time I was with Kate was that she just acted Masha in Chekhov's great play. So Kate, awfully good to see you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this conversation. And if there's any way you'd like to frame yourself better than what I've just done, I'm sure you could.
No, it's perfect. And I'm so happy to be here, George. I think of myself as a communication coach, but not in communications. For live communication. It's drawing what the background that I have with Kathy is the aerial group and theater. So.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've seen you give speeches that have just stunned me, that have opened my heart, broken my heart, all kinds of things. So it really is a pleasure to have you here. So I'm curious, what intrigued you both about the Golden Civilization, but about joining me on Facebook Live today?
Well, generally about the Golden Civilizations, I keep thinking that, when I work with people, I'm from the world of theater, and Stanislavski talked a lot about intention, objective, what we refer to as passionate purpose. Right. And when I work with individuals and organizations, the first thing I want to ask them often is their vision and mission, right? The vision is where I'm going, true north, and the mission is how I'm going to get there. So you could have a vision to bring, to halt climate change, and you could be getting there through folk singing. I mean, it doesn't matter how, we do it in our own ways. So this Golden Civilization to me sounded like a true north. It sounded like a collective true north, that if we know where we're going clearly, then the mission or how we get there might be more clear to us as well.
Yes.
So that I feel like if we don't have that true north, we don't know where we're going. Also, it has to be positive, right? In theater, we talk about playing the positive choice. It has to be, or else there's no energy towards it.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. How does that work in theater? Just for a little aside.
I should say that this is Michael Warren Powell. I don't know if this is all theater, but I had a really wonderful director at Circle Rep who, in an audition, said, play the positive choice. I was playing the choice that my husband will never agree with me and never come around and never forgive me, right? And he said, play the positive choice.
Oh,
it's so much more interesting. It's so much more buoyant. It's so much more alive. That this time it's going to work, right?
Wow.
So that I always
cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the Golden Civilization is, first of all, teasing out what is the positive choice. What are the possibilities? Let's look at that.
Yes. It was really interesting. Yesterday, I was in a wonderful, I live now, of course, outside Cambridge and out in a little bit out in the country. But in the old days, I lived in Cambridge all the time. And I went back with my daughter, Rachel, to a little event in Cambridge. And there was this discussion about gun control. And the debate was, and I don't remember, I just don't know, pardon me, listeners, viewers, I don't know the difference between an AR-15, AK-47, whatever it is, but it was about one of those, automatic fire weapons. And someone else was bringing up, well, a deer gun in the old days, before they had these automatic weapons, it'll shoot 6 rounds. And then there was a debate on what Beto perhaps should have said in Texas around all this. And it was all around the details, around the tactics kind of what you can do right now. And after they, completed that, I said, I just have a completely different frame on this.
Huh.
It seems to me that what we really ought to be doing is looking at, in a golden civilization, in a civilization that we really want, what would be our vision of what that would look like?
Yeah.
And then come back and look at, and immediately both the people said, well, I don't know that we'd have guns. It was like that quick. So, what is the vision that we're...
Absolutely. That we are able, well, this brings me to one of my first questions. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, good. So it brings up that question of freedom. And you use the word freedom in every one of your 7, what are they called? Intentions?
Yes, 7 integrities. Yeah.
Integrities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And freedom is a word that we are using, we hear all the time, right? What does it mean to be free? How can one person be free if it takes away someone else's freedom or life or livelihood or whatever, right? So so I was really curious, because in that gun conversation, that's of course one of the biggest words that is bandied around is freedom. Right. This is my freedom, but what if that freedom is hurting others?
Yes, yes. And
so I wanted to ask you about the use of that word in your thinking.
Yeah, fabulous. I'm so glad you have. And I used freedom and integrity intentionally. They aren't used a lot. They're used more in conservative circles than in more liberal circles. And I thought, these are great words. Let's understand them together as a whole society, what they really look like, what they really mean. And let's gather together around our shared vision of what they might mean. So for me, I mean, it's really, and it's been really interesting being in Mumbai, where freedom means having a shelter, having enough food on the table, not having to beg. And you can see, as I delivered a golden civilization conversation there, you can see the tears in their eyes. These were an educated community, so they're probably middle class to upper middle class community by and large, and tears in their eyes around the poverty around them. And so very much as they were imaging golden civilization, much as happened in Charlottesville, there was the question of inequality and poverty, but it took on a much larger significance. And it was much more tender. For people, there's much more vulnerability around it. What can we do? So freedom, there's freedom, just basic freedom, and the freedom to live, and then there's all the way on the other side, there's the freedom of the democratic freedoms. And when I was in Hong Kong, of course, everybody there was like, will we have freedom? Will we have that kind of freedom?
Right.
So they're really concerned about freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly. The freedom that you were just describing is kind of a classic dilemma that I think is a fool's question. Unfortunately, I think that we've been tricked by it. So if you have freedom and I take that freedom for myself, how would that be? And I think that's kind of changing democratic freedoms into market freedoms. And the way we've understood market freedoms is not even true. It's the whole notion of free markets has been appropriated by large institutions and frankly billionaires to argue for their freedom to do whatever they want. But that's not what a democratic freedom is. That's not what market freedom really means. And that's where you have this notion that you can take away from me, I could take away from you our freedom. I think that's something for all of us to look at and realize that if money is the measure of freedom, then one person could take it all away from us. But so we need to look at freedom in a different way. We need to look at democratic freedom. We need to look at basic income kind of freedom. And the other freedom that, of course, I'm passionate about is the inner freedom that comes, that delivers virtues and has more of a spirit kind of side to it, more depth to it. So freedom, I think, has to incorporate all those things. And I think it's a rich discussion for all of us to engage in, not just for me to dictate or anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
How does that sound?
It sounds good. And so then there was freedom. And then the other word that I found really interesting, and you were maybe touching on it with the market, free market,
Yeah,
was entrepreneurial.
yeah,
Where you say entrepreneurial spirit, which
yeah,
I think you're also using in a different way that I'm used to hearing it, because entrepreneurial usually to me means business, you
yeah.
know?
Right.
So can you talk about entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, you bet, you bet. And again, one of my thoughts here was that we've lost the value of this language and it's
Yeah.
appropriated. So as you say, it means business. So who actually has access to that freedom? And we think, well, it's the business school elites, right?
Right.
Or it's venture capital or private equity. It's these people who have lots and lots of resources, and it's not for us.
Yeah.
So I think that entrepreneurial spirit is what we really want to free inside of everyone. And the way I think of it is as this enormous vitality you talked about in theater. In theater, as you're identifying, or in your coaching, as you're identifying the vision, part of your understanding of that vision is, where is that passionate purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that passionate purpose is filled with entrepreneurial energy. That's really entrepreneurial spirit.
And so when you say entrepreneurial, do you mean sort of do it yourselfness? Like, I don't know, how do you define entrepreneurial? Does it always have to do with money and business and earning something?
I think you've done this too, but Kathy, with our children, had an entrepreneurial energy around leaving business and going, I really want to care for the kids. This is the only time I've got. This is what my passionate purpose will be for the next 6 or 8 years. And so I think passionate purpose can have to do with compassion, with the children that are locked up along the border, with just saying, no, I want to do something about that. So, and then yes, we're launched inside ourselves to make a move, and we may make it in collaboration with others, but we know we have to do something. We have a passionate purpose, and we're going to make a difference with it. So,
Okay, so it sounds to me like you're saying entrepreneurial doesn't necessarily have to do with money at all, that it really has to do with what you do.
Right.
With the direction you're going, what you actually do with your time, with your life, with your energy.
Yes, yes, yeah, and it's like what your acting coach said. Don't go with the negative stuff, but choose the positive. And so this is the entrepreneurial energy is just filled with that positive energy. It may come from feeling that something's wrong in the world and you want to change it, but it's not feeling that something's wrong with the world and you're kind of burdened by it, like many of us feel right now in the world.
So, and I just want to be really reiterate. I mean, I just want to say also, he wasn't saying there's no negativity or darkness in that he wasn't saying that at all.
Right.
But that the human spirit has to go. It's like what is that? Tillich talked about the courage to be, right? That we have to have this courageous movement forward, or else. Can I tell you a story? Because I told it the other day in a talk, and it just reminds me of what we're talking about.
I love your story.
So it gets into, maybe I told you this one before, maybe it gets into role and intention. Like, what am I doing?
Great.
When my dad was at the University of Cincinnati, they were having a hard time.
Yeah.
He was brought in to kind of save the university because it didn't have enough money. So it was a municipal city university. It was either going to become a private institution or join the state system in order to survive. And there was a lot of conflicts around it. And my dad was really getting worn down and just really bereft.
Ooh.
And he was at a board meeting, and the chairman of the board took him aside and said, listen, Warren, we are not paying you to wallow. We are paying you to lead us out of this mess.
Wow.
And, and my dad had forgotten his role, right?
Right.
It's fine to have all those feelings. You certainly don't want to disavow them, because as you know, they're there and they're going to get you somehow.
Right.
The difference was when he remembered, oh, my role has an action. I'm to lead out of this mess. Yeah. And with that intention, right? To lead us out of this mess. Yes. And so there's an example where it's not that it wasn't difficult, but that there was this reset of like, oh, where am I going? Right.
Yeah.
Where's my true north? Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, and it brings up. I mean, of course, Warren was the genius around leadership, and wonderful, so human as well, to be touched with that moment of failure, to come out of that and make it happen. I was just with an incredible professor who had touched me. Gosh, it must have been 25 years ago, and I'd met him for maybe 5 minutes and then observed him for maybe an hour. But I'd actually met him and had a conversation for about 5 minutes. And I remembered that conversation for 20, 25 years. Mm. And he's now 91 years old. And what I remembered was, in a relatively chaotic situation, he was completely at peace and was really clear as to what his mission was, what he had, what his role, again, what he needed to do. And it was almost as if I'd never met someone that's so clear. Of course, I think Warren also touched me that way the few times I met him. But I had to go back and thank him. So he's in an elder care facility, and his brain's still sharp, but his body is shaking with 91 years of age. And I went back and spent an hour with him and just shared with him how much that 5 minutes meant to me, for leadership. So we veered a little bit from golden civilization, but it requires, in a way, each of us to learn to be willing to be leaders, to step up.
Well, you have a great line on leaders. This is like one of my favorite lines I've ever read on leaders. This is the other stuff I want to talk about.
Well, great.
Leaders. Just this first line: great leaders inspire us to be better people than we are.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Is that everyone's going to,
isn't it?
Just
yeah.
Do the best they can.
You see that and you realize, oh my God, that actually, you can do that. I mean, that's just, whoa. And one of the things that of course, our whole political spectrum has been failing us in our ability to see that quality of leadership that is better than who we are. So I think that calls to how a golden civilization is as much an inner place where we know ourselves in a way, and know what our authenticity really means at the deepest level. And therefore, in moments, we can call to it. We can call it forth, as your father recognized. Oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's who I am. Yeah. Wow.
So, can I ask one last question?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you have to meditate to be mindful? How many people asked that question? First of all,
what's that?
How many people have asked you that question?
Not a lot, but a number. It's happened over the years, and
I mean, maybe I could just say, well, I meditate all the time at red lights, but I don't really consciously. No. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can get away with it, Kate. I think I think the practice has so much value that it's worth cutting through the challenges, the resistance, the busyness, the irritation, the frustrations around it, and trying it. I think it has so much value, and you'd see that in the book that Danny Goleman, he was the one who wrote Emotional Intelligence way back when, and now he's written this book called Altered Traits, and it shows what happens from deepening a practice. You have you have so much awareness and so much presence, and in that presence is a lot of focus. So even though you may feel challenged going inside yourself to close your eyes and actually be with those moments, I think with a good teacher, you could be inspired to do it. And I think it would have value. No matter what, it would have value. But do you have to? No.
I mean, in a golden civilization, is everyone meditating? Like, are there other ways to mindfulness, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I think a great, there was a wonderful thinker back around the time of Confucius named Chuang Tzu. or a little bit after, and in China. And he was, Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, and Chuang Tzu wrote this wild book, and he was associated with the I Ching and the tossing of the I Ching. And he would describe how a diamond cutter, so focused, and just with each stroke, just knew exactly where to cut. And it was that focus that made it happen. And he spoke, and I think that what you do in acting is very similar from what I've gathered from Kathy, certainly. All the stories about, I mean, you probably know the story about the dripping water. That you're in a, so this, yeah, I don't know, it was Pete Kovner or Jerry Kissel or one of the guys up here was in a play, and the ceiling started to leak.
Yeah.
And everybody turned to that leak and started ignoring the play, right? Everybody in the audience. So what the actor did was they noticed that, and so immediately their role had shifted, because ultimately their role is one of engagement with the audience, and if the audience isn't engaged, you got to bring them back in somehow. So they put their finger out like this, and the water and the drip just to fall on their finger. And then they took it and they went like that. Mm. Just really, really simple. And suddenly everybody was right back into the engagement, the theater piece.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of the thing that I love about mindfulness and following the breath is that every moment is calling for you to pay that kind of attention to it. And that's why I think you could be really, really good if you actually decided you wanted to do it. Every moment is simply calling for you to pay that kind of attention to it. And it arises and passes away, arises and passes away. And the more that you do that, the more, because what you're also doing is you're constantly, every time you don't do it, you're aware that your desire or your greed or your anxiety or your frustration or your annoyance got in the way of just being here with the water. And so you're doing this two things of being really present and training the mind to overcome or move through or past those blocks, those neurotic blocks that we all have. And so you're training and so the third level of that is that you're training a deeper and deeper access to your authenticity. Instead of being driven by the slight neurotic habits that we all have, you're finding a way to have that peace that this professor that I engaged with had.
Yeah.
And having more and more access. And then when you're engaged in the world, you can trust much more your authenticity being true, being really there. So I don't know if I really answered your question.
No, that's really helpful. And it's funny because it also reminds me of that you can't disavow your feelings or what's actually happening, right? To ignore it. Yeah. If it's happening, it's happening, right? You can't disavow, you have to integrate it for sure. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Great. Well, thank you. Anything else, or is this?
That's my questions.
Oh, wonderful. Let me just ask you one question for you. Yeah. Coming back, we had such a wonderful evening at your place in Charlottesville. It still glows for us. And I mean, it was such a rich gathering of people from the Charlottesville community, from all over the community. And then really going at this question of what is our mission? And then how might we approach it? And I'm just wondering, going back and viewing that, the work that you had to do putting into it, the actual experience of it, the aftermath, what's your reflection on it?
It's interesting. Like, I'm really glad we did it. And I have feelings about it, like a little bit of regret that I didn't prepare enough myself to, I don't know how to say it, but I feel like, in Charlottesville, we're still very raw, and feel like we're dancing as fast as we can. Right. So for me, I can tell you what I took from it that was really, I don't even know if this was part of, what was intended, but that's what's so interesting. It became very clear to me
Wow.
that I can only give things that give me something back. And that sounds very selfish, but it's because I feel tapped out.
Wow. Wow.
So it made me say, okay, from now on, I'm not just going to do things because I should or the right thing to do. I have to say, I can give you a great example. Okay.
Great.
I used to be the president of our neighborhood association.
Right.
It just drew out the worst parts of me. It was just wore me down, and it's really important work. And and other people can, do that much better than I can without having it just, really deplete me so much that my relationships became strained. I had hard times with my family. My teenage boy had to say, "Mom, don't do this,"
Yeah.
So so that the things that I do have to feel like that they feel generative, right? I have to do that. I told you that last summer we saw Charles Handy, who's a wonderful writer and, philosopher and business thinker and all of that kind of stuff.
Lovely
And he
man.
said he was writing a book for his grandchildren. And I said, what's it about? And he said, it's that I want them to do what they do best to the best of their ability for the good of others.
Fabulous. Wow.
And that's what was missing for me, right? Was that I wasn't doing what I did best.
Right.
The best. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, these are the things I do well. I'm a coach. I coach speakers, and that doesn't drain me. It fills me up. So
Wow.
I'm coaching people who are then going out and doing important work. And I'm hoping that somehow is enough, right?
Fantastic.
That lawyers, and scientists and people who are out there doing the work that I think is really important. And I can hopefully help them get their content out there in a way that has more impact. And if that's what I do best to the best of my ability, that's what I'm going to keep doing. So that's what I mean, just to make sure that my energy, because we are all so tapped out. So that was one big thing that came out of that for me, because there have always been lots of nonprofits in Charlottesville.
Right.
But since August 12th, a few years ago, it's just thousands. And there are so many things to put our energy and time into. So we have to really think, what are the things that are going to make me feel like I actually have some impact?
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. That was a big one. I think I felt that from the group.
Yep.
Just where do we start, to really take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. There was one person in particular that was really knew the self-care piece was profound for him.
Oh yeah.
What he'd gone through. And
he's not the only one. There were so many people who had, it really, it hurt us physically.
Yes.
Psychically, emotionally, physically.
Well, fabulous.
And it's a wake-up call for sure for all those of us in the South.
Yes. And that's a fabulous lesson. And
I would say white people in the South, yeah.
Yeah. How else can you actually really make a difference? And that's fantastic. Well, and just to give a pitch for your coaching, for anybody listening, it's just fabulous. So, as I'm sure you can tell.
Thank you so much for coming down. Thank you so much for bringing Kathy. Thank you so much. I learned so much watching you facilitate. I can't tell you. Today, when you spoke of your teacher, that I thought, oh, well, George kind of has that. We were raw. It was full of emotion, and you were just right there with us, just taking it all. Yeah. Bringing it all in, accepting it all. Holding it all. It was just beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it was an incredible night with everybody. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much.
Right. Take care.
Good luck with all. Bye to all. Say hi to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.